Hello, welcome to KiPI version 1.0 and our review of how we do agreement analysis. Calculating the effective rate in your PSA software is very important, and as we look at how we go about it, it is important for you to understand how KiPI takes a look at your PSA system and tries to determine what that effective rate is. For Connectwise, for billing agreements, agreements come in a couple different flavors. You can have managed services billing, hosting agreements, you can have cloud services, virus protection, email services, etc. The difference between some of these managed services agreements, or these agreements in general, is that for some there is a fixed cost and a fixed value. Very easy for you to determine profitability in those types of agreements. However, for some agreements, like your managed services all-you-can-eat type agreements, you have a fixed value that you bill, and then you have a variable cost like labor that comes along after that. KiPI helps you to understand this variable cost. Agreements are a key to any organization's success. It's also important that you're able to measure exactly how those are working for your organization. Effective rate is something that people talk about over and over again in the PSA world. It is important for companies to see what their effective rate is, and the process with Connectwise can be somewhat complicated depending on what your billing model is. KiPI looks to streamline that and give you a tool that lets you quickly get to your effective rate model on a monthly basis. It's important for you to understand kind of how KiPI thinks about effective rate. First, because it is an important metric in the PSA, it's important to realize that we believe that KiPI as a product is something that is on the shelf. When a client comes and purchases a managed service agreement, what they're really buying is that labor that is sitting on the shelf that they are ready to use. The question is, how much of that labor are they buying, and what is the real effective rate that you are getting on a monthly basis with a client? So in looking at how an organization will typically do agreement billing, you want to make sure that you have your PSA best practices billing model in place, so that all invoices generated against a given agreement are also generated in that given month. So in this example, really quick, we kind of show here at the first of the month we bill our agreement for $1,000 for a given client. At that time we have no idea of how much time we are going to put into the agreement. Somewhere around the middle of the month, a second invoice is sent to that client. It is a $0 invoice because 8.5 hours that were rounded up in Connectwise were covered under the agreement. And then over here, you then have at the end of the month a $50 billing that has 3.75 additional hours on it, and $50 that was billed out of scope. It's always important to join the out of scope time with your agreement time to try to figure out what is your effective rate for that company. Because that's what we are looking for, is the overall effective rate for an organization, regardless of what ways we use to bill labor. So if we look at this example and we look at the effective rate from Connectwise, our effective rate, as we would calculate it based on Connectwise hours, could potentially be 85.71 hours. That's taking $1,000 plus 50, taking our time of 8.5 plus 3.75, and dividing them. And that's using the Connectwise rounding up every 15 minutes. Well, what happens if that's different than your real effective rate? $85 may be low for you as an organization. So what is real effective rate? KiPI will actually give you your real effective rate based on the real time that your employees also put into that organization. So in this case, to bill 8.5 hours, the employee actually put in 7.2 hours. And to bill the 3.75 hours, the employee put in really only 3 hours of time. So your real effective rate is 102.94. And these numbers, it is important to know both of those, and KiPI makes those readily available to you for review and looking. To calculate the effective rate in KiPI for the agreements model, there are two screens that you would use to do that. Under Financial Review, you would go to Invoicing and open up that view. And you'll also want to go under Financial Review, Analyze Effective Rate and Profitability. In here, the standard view gives you your invoicing in one sub-tab, and the Analyze Effective Rate and Service Profitability in another tab. For us to analyze an invoice, we're going to look at a specific company called Master Service, and in here we're going to take a look at a Master Service billing cycle. For 2010, if we drill into December, we see for Master Service the agreement that we're going to analyze is True Remote. And for True Remote, we can see a fixed rate billing of $2,138. On top of that, we then have some additional billings that could potentially be included in the True Remote billing for calculations. In here, we can see that we also have another agreement that's billing for DNS and email filtering and some other services. Here, this is an agreement for services where the amount of time and the invoice total is actually less because some of that time was probably included in the agreement. We see here that we had 2 product sales for Master Service, and then we also see this as a product sale, and then we also see a second invoice for time. When you want to generate an invoice for a single entity, you can right-click on any of the invoices and select Analyze Invoice. That starts up the invoice analysis engine for Master Service and is taking a quick look at this one invoice and telling us some very key information. So when we look at this screen here, we can see that invoice 21632 is considered the parent invoice. It then discovered that invoice 21856 right here for $1,111 and 22138 right up here for $1,766 are 2 additional invoices associated with this agreement. As we drill down through, it shows the parent agreement invoice of $2,138 and additional time invoice billing of $2877.50. When we look at this, the whole agreement for this month, for this organization, because of some of the out-of-scope billing, came out to be $5,015.50. The important thing to note here is that when we look at the number of hours that it took to service this contract of 63 hours against the number of hours, 81, that Connectwise rounded up for, gives us a difference right here of $79.50 for our real rate and $61.91 for our Connectwise rate. When you run this for these agreements, you can run it from any given point, and if an analysis is already run, you can click View Analysis Log, which brings up that same information. So if it's already been calculated for you, there's some very detailed information on the agreement and the element itself, so you can get a sense of how the calculation engine worked for yourself. Once this is calculated, you can go to Analyze Effective Rate and Service Profitability. And in here, if we remember, the 2 numbers to remember are $79.50, $61.91. The effective rate at this time is focused on the rate that you get for your agreement. So in Master Service, if we were to go back and look at 2010 for month 12, and if we were then to look at this for the given month, under here for month 12, we can see the users, we can see this, and we can see the total hours rate, and we can see the average hourly rate that we're using for this calculation is $61.92. It's our opinion that the average hourly rate should always be the Connectwise calculated one based on the time that you put in. It is to your advantage to use that as your measurement for your organization. But that doesn't mean that in the actual calculations itself, the average hourly rate or the real rate is still preserved and could be used for future analysis using other mechanisms of KiPI. So in here, very quickly, I can see that for this month, I billed $5,015.52 because we have some rounding challenges in here. But it basically shows us our effective rate of $61.92, and then it also shows us who were the members who produced the most work under there. Here we had one member that did 47.5 hours, and the rest we can see, other than this member of 28 hours, was relatively incidental to the contract in and of itself. But in one fell swoop, we were able to look at this, and also we can also view the analysis log from here, which can be useful. So in this regard, you can now look, and as you run these on a monthly basis, you can start to see the history for this client as you go down through of what were the billable total revenue and what was the billable rate. How do we do in given months as a effective rate average? So this starts to give you a better sense of a given client, and if you were to run this against your whole group of clients, realize that back in invoicing, you can always pick the given day and the given month. And if you click Analyze Invoices, this will analyze all of your invoices for that entire month. It will reanalyze invoices that have been done and also pick up any invoices that may not have been analyzed. So if you were to clear out this company name, you'd be able to see exactly how much you invoiced in the given year. And if you were also to look at this for your entire business, you'd see how much of those dollars actually were taken by KiPI and applied back to the variable element labor in your agreements with your organizations.